Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming to our 15 Minutes of Utopia. These happen every Thursday and Friday at 1:30 if you want to come to any of the others. And today we have Rosanna McNamara, who's going to be talking about Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto.
Thank you so much. Yes, so today I will be briefly introducing Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto and discuss a little bit about how I see the cyborg as a useful concept for our discussions of utopia today. And as I said previously, for anyone that wants more information about the manifesto or cyborg theory or the talk in general, then please just come and chat with me afterwards and I can point you in the right direction. Okay, so a Cyborg Manifesto is an essay that was published over 30 years ago in 1985 by Donna Haraway, who is a prominent American scholar in science and technology studies. She's the author of numerous books and essays that bring together questions of science and feminism. Haraway wrote the manifesto in an effort to formulate the concept of a feminist cyborg in the midst of the Reagan era in America and the decline of leftist socialist politics. The cyborg is a socialist feminist critique on biological essentialism, which is a concept employed in certain feminist politics that believes that human nature, individual's personality, or some specific quality, such as masculinity and femininity, is an innate and natural essence rather than a product of circumstances and culture. Biological essentialism is typically invoked where there is a focus on difference. So, for example, females are seen as biologically different from males, and thus female or gender becomes an essentialist category with specific criteria. However, the cyborg is a direct critique of this idea and instead seeks to establish relations between different entities, both organic and man-made, through affinity rather than through biological determinism. But how does Haraway specifically envision the cyborg, and how is it different to other technological ontologies? The cyborg, or cybernetic organism, has its origins back in 1960, when NASA engineers Manfred Clynes and Nathan Kline coined the term to denote a human-machine hybrid, and the cyborg was originally used for militaristic purposes. In a Cyborg Manifesto, Haraway reappropriates the figure of the cyborg and rewires it into something feminist and something that ultimately resists its militaristic origins. Origins for Haraway are inessential. She envisions the cyborg as a retold story, a version that reverses. It doesn't need its origin. It manifests itself through an affinity with other entities. The key aspects of the manifesto that I want to draw attention to is the three boundary breakdowns of the cyborg that Haraway describes in the essay, namely the breakdowns between human and non-human organism, between organism and machine, and between the physical and the non-physical. Haraway writes, "Evolution has blurred the lines between human and animal. 20th century machines have made ambiguous the lines between natural and artificial, and microelectrics and the political invisibility of cyborgs have confused the lines of physicality. It is significant that the cyborg isn't just about amalgamations of human and machine as it is commonly visualized. For Haraway, the cyborg isn't about the advancement of humanity to become immortal or superhuman through technological means. It is about breaking down categories of identity, such as woman as not male, or this is human and this is not human, in order to refute and refuse essentialist categories of identity." Haraway's cyborg thrives on unresolved contradictions as a way to explore embodied multiplicity. So just to explain this a bit, when something is embodied, it means it is of or relating to the body as something that is tangible and material. And thus, on the other hand, disembodied means it is disengaged from the physical body. So, for example, the discussion of embodiment is inherent in talking about the mind-body dualism with regards to Descartes and his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." Being is associated with thought, and thought is associated with the mind. So to have a mind is to exist regardless of the body. The mind is classed as superior to the body because it is immaterial, conscious, rational, etc. It is above the realm of the material world. For me, the vitally important aspect of the cyborg is that it disrupts the binary between embodiment and disembodiment. It calls into question the superiority of humans over animals, or the objectness of a machine, or the separation of visible and invisible. The cyborg challenges binary thinking by existing as both at once. It is both tangible and intangible, fact and fiction, partial and whole, etc. It lives to confuse, and it takes pleasure in these confusions. But the mind-body dualism didn't end with Descartes. It is still very much alive today in branches of post-humanism and transhumanism, for example. There are post- and transhumanists that seek to enrich humanity at the expense of the material body, meaning the body becomes an object to be controlled or even discarded completely. So, for example, ideas like uploaded consciousness or mind uploading, where your mind literally exists on a computer. This completely rejects the material body because the body as flesh, as waste, as decay, etc., is believed to be hindering the advancement of humanity. Some post- and transhumanists believe the physicality of the material body places negative limits on human potential, seeking rather to use technological enhancements as a way to overcome the inevitability of our mortality. Such ideas as this, to me, are problematic because they strive for a sort of disembodied objectivity that rejects bodily differences between people. That does not mean that bodies must be subjected to essentialist categories, but for me it is imperative to recognize that humanity cannot be treated as a fixed, monolithic group. Issues like gender, race, sexuality, ability, class, among others, are too significant to disappear into the disembodied concept of a transcendent post-human. Haraway herself spurns post-humanism as a loaded term, but perhaps it is more constructive to regard the cyborg as an ontology that emphasizes post-humanity as historically and culturally specific. I believe that an advancement of humanity resides in a step towards greater equality, but equality is not about being the same. To be equal in sameness would mean everyone would have to assimilate to what is dominant, namely whiteness, maleness, heterosexuality, etc., because these are treated as neutral, with everything else being different or diverse from this central ontology. Equality to me is about equality in difference, meaning difference is not a reference point for being less than. I see equality as in difference within the cyborg, as something that enjoys its hybridity and that thrives on its affinity with the other and not on its domination. With its kinship to other entities, the cyborg has the Copernican potential to remove humans from the nucleus of the ecosystem. In fact, there would be no nucleus at all. Within a cyborg ontology, man, as historically perceived as the center of the universe, is dethroned and displaced, instead coming to exist in networks of tight couplings with other creatures, both organic and man-made. The cyborg has the potential to dismantle power structures that seek to control and assimilate organisms into hierarchical categories. So with such words as dismantle and displace, is the cyborg utopian, and how is it important for our discussions of utopia today? Well, Haraway talks about the feminist cyborg as being oppositional and utopian in the same sentence, which to me is very interesting, as the word utopia itself is an oppositional term. It is both no place and good place. The word utopia literally throws the utopia-dystopia binary into question, something which I feel is vitally important to our discussions of utopia today. Utopia and dystopia may be seen as opposites, but they align with one another and they rely on one another. They can exist as opposites and at the same time exist as one and the same based on different contexts. Discussions of utopia must always be situated in context in order for them to take embodied difference into account. There are very real power structures of oppression that exist, and these cannot be glossed over in order to create some beautified ideal of an objective utopia where everybody is the same. Enabling the space for critique is imperative to creating ethical utopias. Haraway's cyborg has been criticized as being merely an icon of utopian thought that will do a great disservice to feminism because feminism doesn't need another utopian vision, but I see this as unreasonable. Feminism as a political struggle is orientated towards the future, one not directly recognizable, but envisioned as something that may actively transform society through a critique of the present. Even though there are issues of depicting utopia as unchanging and unquestioning, utopias can be strategically prophetic in their idealized view of what is not yet. I believe it is productive to envisage alternative utopias where the concept is treated like a blueprint to be lived out in material embodiment. Haraway recognised the existing cultural capital of the cyborg when writing her manifesto, but emphasised that these origins are inessential. The iconography of the cyborg can be transformed through the tactic of appropriation as an intervention against its past. Appropriation, when employed ethically, can be an agency of change, allowing for positive transformations to manifest on an infinite basis. The cyborg thus becomes a figure of multiplicity and difference. It is, as Haraway says, an on-the-ground working project and is lived out through the agency of its embodied subjects. Okay, so how might the cyborg help manifest ethical relations between organisms? For me, I see the cyborg as a figuration that exists in excess of organisms. It is something that means we can be more than ourselves, because what even is a self? The cyborg is about becoming and not just being. What I mean here is that being, philosophically, has been criticized as a static perception of existence, that you just are and that is it. Becoming is much more interesting because it describes being as always in motion. You're always becoming something else or something more. And rather than thinking of this in a linear manner, like climbing up a ladder, the cyborg allows us to think about becoming in a myriad of horizontal paths, where there is no right or wrong way to travel. The cyborg isn't about ascension, but about collaboration. The cyborg is identity in motion. Envisioning the cyborg as made up of assemblages between art, science, and society creates a post-human ontology that has the potential of constantly becoming otherwise. It becomes a political practice, a nomadic body weaving together different lived experiences. Haraway describes the cyborg as a performative image that can be inhabited willfully. Instead of thinking about the cyborg too literally, it is perhaps advantageous to view the cyborg as an inhabitable chimeric figure that anyone and anything can embody. An exploration into cyborg ontology can confront very real and very significant issues regarding the survival of the human body within an ever-advancing information age. Questions concerning the relationship between organisms and machines will not disappear, and it is vital these questions are examined through an ethical framework. Prophecies about the future of the human body must focus on the corporeal to avoid repeating disembodied configurations of the post-human. Without the materiality of the body, lived experiences of difference, which emphasize the various relationships people have with their own body and with other bodies, risk either being consumed into a totalizing concept of a universalized existence or to be erased altogether for not conforming to the ideal. An ethical post-human ontology must recognize the physicality of the body as the starting point for any discussion of technology, identifying the material body as a solution to the erasure of difference. Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions you'd like to ask?
So which year was this written?
1985. Yeah.
Has there been anyone who's kind of updated it since, like, the proliferation of computers and things like that?
I mean, it's been, the problem is that Haraway actually doesn't really like the manifesto anymore. It's quite interesting to hear her talk about it now. It's sort of like, because people have drawn like it into sort of like ideas of posthumanism and stuff like that, and she herself has said sort of like that she's not really okay with that. She's not really, she spurns it as quite a loaded term. And also the stuff that she says in the manifesto that now she herself disagrees with. That's what's quite interesting about talking about it kind of like over 30 years later. So people have like taken it in their own way. And actually I was at Virtual Futures Salon a couple of nights ago, and someone had actually their own version of the Cyborg Manifesto, which is like actually nothing really like the original, but it's called like Cyborgia Manifesto, so really close. But so it's been taken in so many different ways, even to the point where Haraway herself has completely sort of like almost disregarded it, that it would be difficult to track it. But yeah, it's just like if she went back through it and then had like Cyborgia Manifesto Part 2 or something. Rewired.
How much of it is actually quite prescient? It's hard to kind of imagine what state. I'm not very familiar with what state of technology we were in 1985.
Yeah.
Was she writing and actually things came to pass, or was it kind of predicting certain things that have actually happened? Or?
It wasn't predicting, sort of like. I think the problem that Haraway has had with it is that she thinks that people have taken it too literally.
Okay.
So people have even said stuff to her because she talks about the relationship between humans and animals. So people say to her, "What? So you're advocating like bestiality and stuff like that?" And she's like, "No, I'm not advocating that." You know. So I think for her it was sort of like more of like a provocation, I suppose, and more sort of like a theory of a way to take the cyborg that originally was a hybrid of human and machine. But then to think about it as more than that, as well as just like between different living creatures. It doesn't just have to be about making this sort of like robot. It can be sort of a machine doesn't even have to exist in that ontology for it to be a cyborg. It could just be human and animals, and like the relationship between her, like you and your dog or something. She would see that as like like that. So one of the problems that she's had is that people have taken it literally, and she's talked about it in a way that's like, yeah, I didn't actually mean it like that.
How does she see consciousness? Because that's the difference between humans and robots and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's her thinking on that?
Cyborgian relationship is about consciousness and about empathy more than anything. So I think she sees consciousness rather than in being something how kind of rational or intellectual you are. It's more about how much you can relate to other entities. And so consciousness and sort of like the cyborg for her isn't about becoming something like Nietzsche. Yeah. It's not. It's more about sort of like kinship, and so she's in being able to relate to other things on an ethical level. Yeah, basically, it's all about empathy and affinity and stuff like that. More on a sort of rather than a hierarchical level, it's more on a horizontal. Yeah. Yeah, basically.
So does it link into how we view the? Sorry. No, I was just wondering if I didn't.
No, I was just thinking shared experience.
Yeah, basically.
Summary.
Yeah. So like, not being aware of otherness, but not wanting to assimilate, like to control it or to assimilate it into yourself. Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
So is it our view on the natural world? Is that part of what she was?
Yeah. So yeah, sort of like historically how these categories of like hierarchies of being. So with sort of like man, the classical idea of man being put at the top, or like it's more like the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And she's trying to disrupt that, and thinks that basically, yeah, we don't treat animals well enough, and we should all just kind of be in this sort of like network where we empathise and relate to one another in different. And obviously, as I said, she wasn't advocating that you actually like have relations with animals necessarily, but that the relationship between human and animal is more important than we give it, attention. That's what she was trying to, because she's a big animal person. She has lots of books on like relationships with species and stuff like that. A lot of her work is to do with animals as well, actually.
Sorry, more on that human, is the right word, but not like a biologist or an anthropologist, but
Yeah. So the cyborg isn't about sort of biology, because she sees origins as being something that's problematic. She's sort of, because then you kind of get back. So the last line of the manifesto is, "I'd rather be a cyborg than a goddess." And so another part of the manifesto, which I didn't have time to go into, is more sort of talking about this sort of natural sort of epitome of what so like a goddess should be. So sort of like Mother Nature or something like that. She really doesn't like some stuff like that, like, because she sees that as being the flip side of the binary, of being like, you're actually still reinforcing the binary if you're saying like, well, actually no, we should just all be about Earth and not be about the technosphere or something like that. She sees that's just flipping the coin rather than breaking it apart and having these things exist together. Yeah. So she's against that sort of the origins of something, the biological determinism and all that. Yeah, it's more
So
about.
how does she feel about history and time?
It's important, but again, as I was saying, like about reappropriation, she uses that as a tactic, and quite a few feminists use reappropriation which is, it can be very problematic when you're sort of like appropriating things, but it can work quite well, and I think it does with the cyborg. Was that the cyborg was originally like it was used for capitalistic, militaristic purposes in the war, and so she's then trying to take that and rework it into something else. So obviously she couldn't have ever made the cyborg without the history of the cyborg, but she doesn't believe that sort of history is golden, or that that's the way it should be, like nostalgia and stuff like that is difficult. And I'm on her. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm speaking for her. Maybe if she was here, she'd be like, that's completely wrong. But hopefully not. That's what I get from it anyway.
Yes, that's what we want.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Sorry
thanks,
about the
guys.
ruins as well.
I can have a